The Big 12 and college football lost a legend yesterday as Mike Gundy is fired on a random Tuesday in September. What's it mean for the Cougs? What's it mean for the Cats? I think it means good things.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
It is a crossover edition of Locked On Cougs and Locked On Kansas State. I'm here with the Locked On Cougs, Parker Angel, joined by Christian Raw of Locked On Kansas State. And yes, Mike Gundy has been fired. We're going to tackle that in today's episode. That's brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. We're also going to look at what the replacements could look like. And it's Big 12, so we're going to talk basketball schedule being released as well. We got a lot to get into. But Christian, the tweet hits on Tuesday midday, and it just says very simply, I think Bama was one of the first ones. I saw on 3 as well. It just simply said Mike Gundy has been fired or relieved of his duty or some version of that.
Yeah.
Your initial response when you saw that on a random Tuesday in September was?
Yeah, it was a couple of random local news joints first, and I think Pete Thamel picked it up. But yeah, random Tuesday. That's the thing that really gets me, and that's what makes me be shocked and say wow about it. If I had to say one word, that's exactly what I hit this on Tuesday morning. You know, Mike Gundy is an absolute legend, and although things haven't gone right over the last couple of seasons, last year and this year specifically, it's been a nightmare actually, and I could tell you all about that being what Kansas State is right now as well, both being one-win teams and losing to teams you shouldn't lose to. But after that Tulsa loss by Oklahoma State, they finally called it quits on Mike Gundy. But it's an insane feeling that you're there for such a long time, right? In Oklahoma State. I mean, he's the third highest tenured coach. Well, not anymore, but was behind Kirk Ferentz and Kyle Whittingham, and the second most in the Big 12. And Whittingham was only like 20 days too. He's basically the second most highest tenured coach. Before I throw it back at you, because there's a lot of things you can dive into Gundy, but let me just tell you his career resume, because I think it needs to be thrown out here. He was great. He was fantastic. 170-90 record. You don't just do that in the Big 12. 12 bowl wins, made a bowl game in 18 consecutive seasons from 06 to 2023. And that just shows how crazy this world of the NIL and transfer portal, how unforgiving it is. Once that 2023, that bowl streak stopped, he was immediately on the hot seat. Like insane. 8 different 10-win seasons, 2 different 12-win seasons. He had 10 top 25 ranked finishes. Was ranked in the AP top 25 for 17 consecutive seasons. An absolutely insane run by Mike Gundy, and I'm not sure if he's going to continue coaching elsewhere or if he finds himself on TV as an analyst. Either way, I think he'd do a good job, but it's just wild to know that he's no longer going to be in the Big 12 moving forward.
Yeah, Mike Gundy is interesting. Look, I don't think Locked On Cougs fans will be surprised by this. He's not my favorite person in this conference, but he certainly was one of the more entertaining ones. I would also point out, like as far as the Oklahoma State thing goes, he played there in the late 1980s when Robert Griffin broke his record in 2008. That was the most consecutive passes attempted without an interception to start your career as a freshman. That record had been around for over 20 years at that point. He was a good player at Oklahoma State. He spent a lot of his coaching resume at Oklahoma State before he was the head coach. He did have to leave for a couple stints in a couple places to kind of boost that resume a little bit before coming back as the assistant head coach / offense coordinator way back in the gap back in 2001. I'm checking my stats to make sure I'm right on that. 2001 is a long time ago. I say all that to say that I'm sure this was not easy, but Christian, I don't feel like it's not time. A Tuesday in September is weird. I'm sure we'll touch on that a little bit, but like it did kind of feel like this was a divorce where they've been fighting for a minute, right?
Yeah. And this probably should have happened on Sunday or even Saturday, give him the Herm Edwards treatment at the tarmac, or give him the opportunity to go ahead and make a press conference and say he's going to step down on his own terms. Maybe you can give him one last game against Baylor as a farewell because you've been so long. I kind of like how Mac Brown was at the bowl game last year at UNC. I don't know if that's exactly what he wanted, because it sounds like he wants to get ahead of this as well and maybe move on to coaching a different spot. Maybe this is the best for Mike Gundy. Maybe this is the best for him because you can move forward. I don't know if it's the best for Oklahoma State in the short term. In the long term, you obviously have to make changes, and those changes are, moving on from Mike Gundy, because last year It was dreadful. And they gave him one more shot to get things right. They let him change his entire coaching staff. They let him bring in some NIL money. You can talk to our good buddy Cody over at Locked On Oklahoma State. They'll tell you they spent a lot of money on this roster, and the talent level is just not there to where it needs to be. So it's going to be a tough couple years maybe for Oklahoma State, and whoever goes there is going to have a tough job. But I think the candidates are going to be really interesting, and I know we're going to talk about that soon.
Yeah, and the segment about the candidates be its own, because there's lots of stuff to get into on that. I think the timing is really interesting from a Houston perspective, and I want to hear Kansas State because you'll play them later this season as well. In the summertime, when previewing the season, and knowing that things were, kind of hot seat feeling there in Stillwater, I mentioned that Oklahoma State Houston was their 6th game of the season, them being the Cowboys, because that was significant to me because after the 4th game, they could have theoretically fired him, and then all those guys could have been redshirted. So you'd wait till after the 5th game to keep those guys on the roster this season. They've done it so early now. This has not happened as they're recording this episode, but theoretically, the whole roster can hit the portal in the next 30 days and dip out, and anyone that has not used a red shirt could spend this season as a red shirt season and lose no eligibility over it. They couldn't necessarily enroll when they got somewhere else because that's a little more complicated, but this feels odd timing from that perspective too. At Kansas State, y'all got them at the end of the year. Did you see this coming before y'all's game at some point, I assume?
No, I didn't really ever see, unless they were going 0-6, then for Mike Gundy to be fired middle of the season. I just thought because he was there for so long that you give him the whole season, especially because they let him change the entire coaching staff. So maybe give him a full year to figure it out. Maybe, and I don't know this is true, but because there's so many different contracts and stipulations when it comes to NIL. So if this is completely wrong or out the left field, don't blow me up in the comments here, but maybe it has something to do with not only that 4-game mark where you can redshirt and take off and hit that portal. Maybe some of those players, they're kind of hoping that happens because they have NIL contracts, but if they do hit the portal, those contracts are voided, or maybe they don't have to pay as much money, so then they can worry about the budget for the next coach moving forward. Not sure if that's the case, but that's something that definitely came to my mind when I was thinking about this Oklahoma thing and why Oklahoma State thing and why it happened so early in the season. But no, I expected Kansas State to be playing a Mike Gundy team in Stillwater at the end of the season, week 10. I didn't expect it to be a crazy game. I thought it'd be a game where Kansas State was doing well and Gundy was fighting for his job. That was my expectation of that game. But now we're going to have an interim coach in Coach Meacham.
Yeah, and what's funny is, and Cody laid this out in the Sunday morning live reaction show. It's a new thing we're doing. Big 12 hosts at a handful of us at a time. We'll be there on Sunday mornings. He mentioned that it was the first time, and I didn't realize this till he said it, that Tulsa had won in Stillwater since 1951, and between that and the way they lost to Oregon, I don't think anyone would have been mad about him losing to Oregon, but they got beat in what looked like an FCS kind of score with Oregon. They didn't exactly blow the doors off of UT Martin either. I think that this was, a culmination of a handful of bad efforts. The roster thing just surprised me. The Tuesday in September thing also felt a little disrespectful. You mentioned getting left at the tarmac like previous guys have, and that's kind of a running joke in college football. But that almost feels more respectful in that, hey, we're going to start the game week. They've had practices this week at this point. They played Baylor Saturday. It's a weird thing, right?
And it's a weird spot for Baylor to be in too, because how do you project or predict to battle this game? And Baylor's not having the best season so far either. They've had some falls against Auburn, against Arizona State. They already have 2 losses on the docket, something I don't think they were expecting either. So it's hard to prepare for. You don't know if you're going to be playing a team with 80 players or 60 players, right? Because there could be some players that hit the portal. It's insane. A 21-year stint with the Cowboys as the quarterback and the head coach for Mike Gundy is now over and done with. But last year, they didn't win a single Big 12 game. And that's one of the biggest reasons why he was forced to make a lot of changes in his coaching staff to kind of give one more hurrah and see if this works. I still don't think they gave him enough time to see that coaching staff. Maybe the writing was on the wall. Maybe it's just because we saw that this isn't working. The quarterback injury at the beginning of the season doesn't help. And of course, if you look at some of the statistics they had, I remember watching the Tulsa game. and they brought up something on the TV, and they showed a stat, and it was talking about how they're the worst in the FBS in 3-and-outs. And when you're talking about some of the other teams that you're playing against in 3-and-outs, and you're the worst one, and you're supposed to be a power conference team and a offensive driven team like Mike Gundy, then maybe the writing was on the wall. But here's this, and I'm going to leave you with this before you close out this segment. They didn't win a single Big 12 game last year. Is it going to be 2 years in a row for Oklahoma State?
I don't know where they come from. Obviously, I'm picking Houston to beat them. I, I don't mean to pick on you, Christian. I feel like Kansas State and the way they've looked is maybe one of their better chances. And
Like it could be, right? The way that Kansas State's looked at, that might be their best shot. And who knows if Kansas State gets right by then? Who knows if Kansas State still has the same coaching staff at that moment? But
I would think this chaos probably hurts them in that instance too. Now, maybe they've got some great coaching waiting in the Wims. They made coordinator hire, as you mentioned. So we'll talk about who could replace Gundy and what that could mean for the Big 12 as two Big 12 members here in just 1 second. But I should point out that today's episode is also brought to you by our buddies over at Mazda, because Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Look, folks that listen to Locked On Cougs know I have a toddler. Safety is a big deal when you have a toddler in a car, and Mazda delivers confidence with every ride. More IIHS top safety pick awards than anyone else as of last August. It really makes every drive feel like anything but the everyday. Smooth handling, intuitive controls, great craftsmanship, all-wheel drive like players, the Cougs or the Cats. Every detail needs to get sweated out, and when you make every move count, impossible can become irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Today's show is also brought to you by your buddies over at Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, investments. When you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. You have put off organizing your finances. Monarch is here for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. Link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. I mentioned I teach, I coach, I podcast. I got a wife that she works. We got a bunch of income streams, and it all seems to go places. We got to figure out where it's going. Monarch Money helps us see things each and every month. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first full year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. Christian Ronald Parker Ainsworth here, looking at the impact of this with Coach Gundy leaving Oklahoma State. And one of the impacts here, Christian, is bluntly, they're going to get a coach. And we're both in the neighborhood of looking around like, who's that going to be? Now, I don't think they're going for Fritz and his staff. I think in listening to Cody's show, it sounds like they want to go a little bit younger than that. But, Christian, I don't know that y'all are out of the woods.
Yeah, and what I mean by that is not a Kansas State coach, but somebody who has Kansas State ties, and something that a lot of, my everyday listeners and fans of Kansas State want to have for themselves for the replacement or the successor of Chris Klieman, however you want to see it, because a lot of people are calling for him to retire at the end of the season because of his performance so far this year. But Colin Klein, the Texas A&M offensive coordinator who was at Kansas State for 7 years as an assistant before making that jump to College Station, obviously a great player, great quarterback for the Wildcats in his days, is going to be a hot commodity. He's going to be definitely a candidate for sure, in my opinion, at Oklahoma State. I'm sure he's going to be a candidate at every opening this season. What he has done with Marcel Reed at Texas A&M under Mike Elko, I think has been super impressive. And I think he's turned himself into one of the greater offensive minds in college football. I'd put him and Will Stein as the top coordinators on the offensive masterminds in today's game. And I think that's going to mean a lot for teams that are looking to try and build. And that fits that young narrative. And that makes me, as a Kansas State host here, very nervous. It would be a very bad day for the folks in Manhattan if Colin Klein takes over a job in Stillwater.
Well, and I mentioned, I guess, that it would hurt your folks because I felt like there was some rumblings of like, wait, is he leaving for real when he took the A&M offensive coordinator job in the first
Yeah,
place, right? Like
right.
people were kind of shocked that he wasn't just going to wait out Kleiman and take the job then, and that he would take a Big 12 conference job. It feels like a big deal. Now, Christian, I don't mean to ruffle its feathers. It also could very
Ruffle
well
away.
be someone else not from the nice purple lineage you got on. Actually, frankly,
Sure.
I like this sweatshirt a lot. Um, Houston just went through this coaching carousel, and I know that you're talking about people are asking Kleiman to retire in your comment section.
Yeah.
There are a lot of really good coaches in this portion of the country that would use this as a big step up. Houston just looked at Kenny and just looked at Traylor out of Texas State and UTSA, respectively.
Yeah.
Both strong candidates that Houston did not go with. They went with a culture builder in Willie Fritz. It's going well. I'm not upset about it, but that's clearly the direction they went. Does this maybe do you feel like Kansas State is going to miss out on one of these replacement kind of guys if you don't do something? Because there are a lot of them, but they aren't like unlimited numbers of them.
Yeah, for the record, I just want to put out that I'm not ready to say that I'm ready to move on from Chris Kleiman.
Okay,
No,
sorry, that random
no, no,
comment
no,
here
no.
is though.
No, you're fine. Yeah. And I've said that on my show before. This isn't new news for me, but I understand the frustration from my folks. And I think it's worth discussing because these are obviously candidates that could be replacements for Kansas State in the future. Chris Kleiman's not going to be coaching this team forever. He's on the older side as well. And for the record, I do think Chris Kleiman's tied to the athletic director of Gene Taylor. I think when he's done, they're both done. There's going to be a big change in Kansas State athletics. But either way, I'm with you. I do think that there's going to be a lot of candidates going for this job. I think it's a very enticing job. I think you're right in a great recruiting spot. You're close to the state of Texas as well. Oklahoma has a great recruiting window. Oklahoma State did really well in the state of Oklahoma under Gundy. They're going to want to try and find a way to continue to do that and battle with the Sooners. And it wouldn't surprise me if they went after somebody, and that's why Colin Klein moves up because of being in Texas A&M. But having those Texas/Houston ties, Jeff Traylor from UTSA makes a ton of sense. I thought he was going to be going to Texas A&M instead of Mike Elko, if I'm being completely honest with you, because he has a lot of Texas A&M ties. That never worked out, so maybe this is his next stop to get to a Power 4, and I think he'd do an excellent job. UTSA is not having the greatest season right now. They're deciding to not go to the Pac-12. They're staying in the American. Maybe that's them staying still is not something that they want. Maybe that's something that to get Jeff Traylor ready to make that move. And then, of course, you talk about that younger side. Kine has been a excellent coach for Texas State, putting them really on the map, kind of going from UTSA to Texas State, fun rivals there. But yeah, I do think it's going to be somebody out of those lines. There's probably a wild card that comes into play. I know our buddy Cody likes to talk about the young player, and he said he's already heard about some donors throwing in some money. This is a brand new thing that Oklahoma State hasn't had to deal with, as we've mentioned, for almost 2 decades now. So some of these donors are probably stacking up monies, maybe putting it in the index fund, waiting for this moment, pulling it out, and now they're ready to take care of it and invest in this program.
Well, and obviously, Boone T. Pickens is no longer with us, but when he was donating money to the program in the old-fashioned way, the facilities and so on, and his name is all over that campus in Stillwater, that's when Gundy won all those games you were talking about. It can be done at Oklahoma State. You just have to invest in what the current model of college football is, and that's not what they've done the last few years. I should point out, and while it was a lot of scheduling and not a very challenging schedule, they were just in a Big 12 championship game in 2023, right?
Yeah.
Things have gone south since about the end of the first quarter of that game, but they were just there, right? Like they are not that far removed, which is the thing.
Sooner than Kansas State, and we thought very highly of Kansas State for the last couple seasons. Kansas State hasn't made it to Arlington since they won it the year before in 2022. So yeah, people definitely forget about that, Parker.
Well, and as far south as it's gone, I do think that that's why Cougar fans and Wildcat fans need to pay attention, because this feels like someone you can step on right now. Felt like someone you could step on last year. They've proven that they don't necessarily have to be that. And I think that that makes our places in this conference as a program being rebuilt, and frankly, as a program that has been fairly successful in the last decade. This year has been a little bit rough, but those kind of things have happened. That I think that it's worth paying attention to. not because they're poaching someone like the way that Houston fans don't have a Klein connection out there like you do. I do think it's significant to the way Houston fans look at this. Um, Christian, I want to talk about basketball. I want to talk about things that are significant to Houston fans, but is there anything else you got to get out about Gundy as we talk about this conference? Because he is such a legend in the sport.
It's going to feel weird. And I don't know if it's going to be as weird as losing Bill Snyder the first time, because like that was a huge hit to the Big 12 as a whole, just like knowing that you don't have that name and face in the conference anymore. I don't know if it's going to feel like that. And it might just because of the recency bias of him not succeeding over the last couple seasons, but it's going to mean a ton. And it's going to change the way that we look at this conference. Oklahoma State's probably going to have to build up, but it's going to be fun to watch this coaching search from afar. And this is, I think, a really respectable team. I think if they hire the right person, they're going to be right back into consideration very quickly because they have the right ties. They're in the right location. And I don't think our buddy at Brian Smith at the Portal agrees with that, thinking that recruiting is the best way, but I disagree. I think that they're in a good spot for it. What I will say this before we move to a different segment, how funny would it be if they went after Ben Arbuckle, the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma? Because the last couple seasons, Oklahoma's hasn't been really great. And then Arbuckle comes over. It looks like they finally figure out some offensive things with John Mateer. They go and steal Arbuckle from Oklahoma State. And then maybe they take over as the head Oklahoma team once and for all for maybe the next decade or so. Could be very funny.
A second way to win the final Bedlam would be really, really funny. Christian, I want to talk some hoops with you because I'm the Houston guy. That's what we do in just 1 second. But you've got something you got to tell us about.
Oh, absolutely. And I do want to tell you about what this show is sponsored by, the Locked On College Crossover, sponsored by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with this can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if that $5 bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Parker wanted me to do this advertisement today because he didn't want to talk about his Houston Texans and the downfall of CJ Stroud. But if you think he's going to bounce back and have a good year, well, you can put in a same game parlay when they take on the Tennessee Titans this coming Sunday. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
I have to talk to production about editing ad reads there. Christian, I want to talk hoops with you because folks listening to Locked On Cougs know I actually think the world of Jerome Tang. He is a guy that started off at Texas high school basketball, actually outside the Houston area, and I think the world of him. I think he needs a big-time year. Schedules got released on Tuesday as well. That was it was the also ran as far as headlines go on Tuesday,
wild, right?
In college
big
sports. Big day. I've got a couple of back-to-back, not like one day after the next, but certainly very close together games on Houston's conference schedule that got released that ruffle my feathers a little bit because I'm like, ooh, that's tough. But Kansas State kind of needs a good year. You see the schedule come out on Tuesday. How are you feeling, boss?
Yeah, overall, I'm definitely looking at it. I'm a little worried. I'm hoping that you're going to send me a box of chocolates on Valentine's Day because that's when we play Kansas State at Houston. But overall, I look at this schedule and we start off at home in Manhattan against BYU. And BYU has the huge hype next to their name this year, bringing in those top recruits. And what can they do? And then our first road trip is against Arizona. And I've known that Arizona's been always a good team. But if you looked at Arizona's non-conference schedule, and I know I said this off the air to you, but they play Florida on a neutral site, UCLA on a neutral site, UConn, Auburn, Alabama, and San Diego State. That is their non-conference schedule, an absolute gauntlet. So they're going to be truly tested. And then Kansas State has to go there for their first away game in Big 12 play. I agree with you. Jerome Tang talked on Monday, first press conference with the media. Lots to be excited about. There's some optimism. You can see some energy. Wasn't the same feeling that you had from Jerome Tang last season. It sounds like he really likes his new roster. I've been on and off, back and forth with this new roster so far this year. This offseason I've talked about, is there enough talent? Is it more talent than fit? Because last year with the roster, I thought there was a great amount of talent, but that culture and buy-in and fit just wasn't there, and that was ultimately the downfall. but it sounds like he is very excited for this new roster. Said there's multiple leaders on this team. And of course, PJ Haggerty leading the charge. If he's an All-American, I think they find a way to get back into the tournament, something they haven't done the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, and frankly, I think that I love what Tang did when he first got there, and they kind of been chasing that magic ever since. Hearing Tang say that makes me feel like it feels more like a Tang roster than maybe last year or two might have. You mentioned our meeting on February 14th. That starts a week from a place we're not going to say on a family program to me for Houston Cougar basketball, where they host Kansas State, who I think is going to be back this year. We'll see. But then they go to Iowa State on the 16th. Then they host Arizona on the 23rd, and then to Kansas and Fog Allen. They host Arizona on the 21st, and then to Kansas on the 23rd. That is potentially 4 really challenging games in a span of 9 days. They have a tough back-to-back in my head, or back-to-back in college sense, on January 6th and 10th when they host Tech and head to Baylor. And then I think I've got this, they go to Tech and then to TCU on the 24th and 28th of January. Those are kind of circled things in my head that look troublesome, problematic, however you want to say it. Houston's looking to go back-to-back, three-peat in the conference, and I don't think this schedule does them any favors. I will say, full disclosure, that I don't think I circle a game that they can't win on this schedule, but they've won a lot of close games the last handful of years, and you can only do that for so long before one doesn't go your way. Christian, is there any stretch of your schedule that strikes you as particularly daunting?
Well, first, I got to say, when you talk about you probably don't think any team is favored compared to Houston. I mean, there are reasons why teams like Kansas State have talked about trying to imitate the Houston model. You guys are doing it fantastic. But overall, I mean, I think the beginning of Big 12 schedule is going to be huge. Now, the non-conference, I think Kansas State will be a little bit tested as well. They do have to go to Creighton on the road, Indiana on the road as well. Potentially could be 2 AP top 25 teams when they do go after it. And what Jerome Tang said when he was asked why they scheduled those, he said, we're going to be playing multiple Big 12 teams with numbers next to their name this season in their town, in their home court. We got to make sure we're tested and ready to go. I think that's important because last year, their non-conference, they were terrible. They didn't start off strong whatsoever. They lost when they went to the islands to, I believe it was Liberty, if I remember correctly. They lost to some teams that they shouldn't have lost to. You know, I don't remember their schedule right off the top of my head, but either way, it was just not the greatest non-conference. It was important for them to get back on board in the Big 12 at the beginning. They started off decent, but then there was peaks and valleys throughout the season. They just can't have that if they want to get back to the tournament. I do like the way the schedule is set up. Iowa State in Manhattan, not in Ames, with their only game. Houston on the road, that's a tough one as well. But other than that first beginning, BYU at Arizona State, I'm Utah and KU at home is pretty cool back and forth. And then you finish the Big 12 play at Lawrence. But other than that, if they can get a strong start to this one, find a way to take 2 or 3 in their first 3 games between BYU at Arizona or Arizona State, heck, even just 1. If they went 1 and 2 in that stretch, I think you're in a really, really good spot moving forward. And the expectation for Kansas State is just make the tournament. It's not to where Houston standard is right now, where you guys are trying to probably, I'm guessing Big 12 championship is your standard, is your expectation, or maybe you don't even think about that. It's going deep in the tournament. But for Kansas State, getting to the dance is a successful year, and I think it's a great year and a must-do for Jerome Tang this year.
I look at Houston's schedule, and I should say last year they went 19-1. They're not going to do the 20-game schedule again anytime soon, so you can't repeat that.
Probably
right?
for the best, too.
They only play 18 games in conference play this year, so 19-1 can't be done. I don't know that it's a one-loss conference schedule. I will say that I'd imagine, just because I've seen my comment section when they lose multiple games at all, that if you start losing a couple of these conference games, you're going to have people like, what is going on in Houston? It's a lot of freshmen on the roster this year, which is unique for the Cougs. I'm going to say 15-3. And I think that's still being pretty optimistic. You look at the 18 conference games you've got and say what, Christian?
I mean, I'd be happy with 10 and 8, to be honest with you. I think that'd be great. Just getting over 500. I mean, even if you're at 500, I think that gets you, if you have a good non-conference and you're 9-9, in the Big 12, you're in the tournament. I think you are this year for sure. I mean, how many teams made the tournament last year? It was all the way down, and West Virginia was the only team left out. I don't remember what their standings were. I don't have that in front of me, but I'm guessing that they were around that mark in conference standings. Now, either way, I think that if you go at least 500 in the conference, and West Virginia was 6-7 in the conference. There, I just pulled it up for you right there. No, I'm sorry, they were 5-4 in the conference. And I don't even know what I was looking at. No, I'm in football. I'm messing up this segment. Either way, I think you can find a way to get 500 in the Big 12. You're in a good spot, and I think that gets you in the dance, and that's exactly what you need. Whether you're an 8 seed, a 9 seed, a 10 seed, just one of those ones that just get in, whether you're fighting in Dayton as a first 4, I just want the opportunity for Jerome Tang to prove that he's still got it with this new team that he brought in the portal, a completely different kind of portal team that he's done over the last couple seasons. Didn't go and spend a bunch of money like the Coleman Hawkins experience a few years ago. Now we're finally getting a team that seems to be more fit, more unified, and more with leadership and defense, something that wasn't a thing last year for Kansas State.
I should point out that 10 conference wins is what they were 10-10 because of the 20 games. That's what West Virginia basketball. Good. Football is very clearly on your mind, though, Christian. What's on the docket this week for Locked On Kansas State? Folks trying to tune in and see what's going on with the Wildcats.
Yeah, Kansas State is trying not to go 1-4, but they have to beat and give the first loss to UCF on Saturday. That'll be at 11 o'clock Central Time on FS1. Scott Frost is doing actually a pretty decent job with his team just back in Orlando for the second time and first time in the Big 12. Need a huge bounce back for Kansas State. Avery Johnson needs to run the football. Chris Kleiman, I think, is starting to make his seat warm up. We talked about Mike Gundy at the beginning of this episode. It could be starting to get real warm for Chris Kleiman, especially if he loses to UCF, a game that I think is possibly, with the exception of that Oklahoma State game later on in the season, the easiest one left on the schedule. So lots of stuff to be covered. We'll have you here on Locked On Kansas State.
The Houston Cougars head to Corvallis, Oregon, to play the Oregon State Beavers. I keep wanting to say Ducks. Oregon State Beavers on Friday night. Ducks probably get me in trouble there. But they play Friday night at 9:30 Central Time. I want to notice and make sure everyone from UCF heard me said Central Time, not Central University, because that apparently upset them. And don't call them Golden Knights. This has been a crossover episode of Locked On Cougs and Locked On Kansas State. Make sure you subscribe to us. You know when we go live each and every day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. If you haven't gotten out of the Big 12 yet, go check out Locked On Big 12. That Drake Toll guy is talking banana. No, something over there. So we could check him out. I always end with the Go Cougs there. I know that you maybe don't, but salutes to Christian. We'll call it good. See y'all.